This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's been a hot minute for me. Joshua Boy has been doing it all by himself for the last 3. I'm so proud. I'm so proud, Josh. You've been doing it.
I feel like a grown up.
Been doing it, running it by yourself, man.
Yeah.
No, dude, they're really good. They were really
Never
good.
slurp into the mic like that again. Because you're fired.
No, they were really good episodes, man.
Oh, thanks. I tried really hard.
I really dug them. Today, we have a fun episode for you because this is something that I think we've talked about a little bit with guests. We talked about it some with, I think we've talked about it some with everybody other than Jason. We talked about it with Nick. We talked about it with both the Nicks, and we talked about it with John. And that is school as related to the music industry. I think we have some, I don't know, me and Josh probably feel roughly the same about this. Maybe. We might have differing opinions on this. We're going to find out. I'm
pretty sure we've had entire, multiple hour-long conversations about how much we both hate audio school.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think everybody that we've talked to pseudo agrees. I think
there's a gray area where it makes sense,
and I think it also depends on your country.
Yeah. So
DiLorenzo, his school was very much went to school, did the thing, got an internship at the mastering studio, and then that's what he did. It was very, A, B, C, D, very much like old music industry used to be here. Where so now here it's very much like a lot of schools, I don't know, a lot of schools just aren't keeping up with the modern industry. But let's kind of start from our personal experiences before we kind of get into our qualms with it. Let's start with you, Josh. So
I like most kids, whenever you're in high school, you're panicking about what school you're going to go to. So I considered going to Middle Tennessee State. It was very expensive, and I remember looking at that, and I was like, well, I can't afford to do that. My parents can't afford to do that, so, I probably shouldn't do that. So, that automatically took out the other options, like Berkeley, So, I just kind of, had that realization, and I was, thankfully, I was talking to Nick about it, too. And he was kind of able to guide me through it, where he was like, well, you can, but I know plenty of people who didn't. And so I was kind of going back and forth, and I finally came to the decision of, if I go to school, then in 4 years I'll come out with a degree. I probably won't have that much work under my belt, and I'll be in almost $200,000 worth of debt. So I decided to not do it. I was considering Full Sail also, and thankfully some sense got talked into me pretty quickly, because after knowing people who went to Full Sail and went through that whole thing, it's just not a good experience if you actually want to do something other than run for coffee and alcohol for studios. And side note, Full Sail's animation thing is actually really good.
Yeah, it's sick.
My this lady I work with, her son, he went there and he got a job right out of college with DreamWorks.
Mm-hmm. It's because they're in Florida.
This whole thing, and it's very sick. And so yeah, I kind of went through the motions. I was I don't know what to do. I had a little bit of money set aside for college, so I decided to do the Berklee online classes. And I was going for a certificate program just for general music production and mixing. And I mean, it was cool. I learned Pro Tools really well. But like I was in advanced mixing and mastering, learning about volume automation like halfway through the course. And I was like, that's it. I'm dropping out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, part of that was because like I think I was a little bit more egotistical back then. But then part of it also was like, I'm getting a pat on my back because like I program drums, like it just wasn't the type of place that I wanted to really be, especially because like the online curriculum's just weird. Now I know plenty of people who've done like the ear training and music theory stuff online and they loved it. So, it's just like really what you want to get out of it and how much money you have and what you can afford.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of learned pretty quickly that audio school definitely wasn't for me. I have considered going back for music theory just because like I want to learn more about all of that. And I've kind of like set this weird goal in my head that like if I ever make an exorbitant amount of money, then I'm just going to go ahead and take time and like actually go to art school. Because I would really love to get kind of like a off the wall education like that, just to kind of do it, and experience something new, but it's just not on the agenda right now financially and timeline wise. So that's been that's like a brief history of like how I ended up going to audio school, sorta, and then still didn't like it.
Yeah. Mine was I graduated from high school. In the South, it's not especially in 2009. Let's reframe this. There wasn't a lot of, I don't know. There wasn't a lot of like, if you weren't living in a major city that did music, like Nashville, New York, or even Boston or Atlanta, you didn't really know that like production school was a thing. Like it wasn't really like an option. Like I didn't even know what, like, I think we've talked about this before, but I didn't even know what like the producer was a job or mix engineer was like a potential thing that could even be possible, right? Until I was like 2 years into college. So what I did was I was like, oh well, I like music and I played trumpet in high school. I was in band, marching band, all that kind of stuff. I also play guitar and like piano and all that kind of stuff in church band and other bands. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, I could probably go like be a teacher, have a steady job, and just kind of do the band thing on the side. So I went to school at a place called Southern Wesleyan University, which is where my dad went to school. And it was more of like your traditional private school education system, saying it was really geared towards either education or performance. And that was just kind of no in between. And I would say a lot of private schools, at least that I've seen, and like I worked at a private school, a lot of the classes that they offer you are geared towards like one of three things. Mine didn't offer theater, but theater is a big one. And then music performance, and then music education being the third option. So basically they either want you to go play in the jazz group or in an orchestra. They either want you to go do theater work at a small theater, or they want you to teach, which is the most well-paying out of all three of those potentially. I figured out about halfway through my freshman year that, building tracks and making beats and all that kind of stuff was a thing. Got into Ableton and that whole Reason world. I started kind of doing stuff there. And after that, I realized that, I don't know, I enjoyed my time at college. I will say that. I enjoyed probably the first year of school for me. It was a little different because I was physically in person, but also my first year consisted of things like jazz theory, music theory, ear training. My ear training teacher, first one was a jazz musician, so he was really big on like funky chords and like being able to hear like what a 7 and 9 a add 9 sounds like, and being able to like him hit just 2 notes and us be like, that's this interval, like, so that was really cool. But then my that was my first music theory course. My second music theory and ear training course was taught by a lady who has perfect pitch. So we got really into like fine tuning our ears. So, and honestly, those 2 courses have helped me be really good at basically everything that I do, because with a foundational theory and knowledge, and being able to hear a note and go, okay, well, that's this like hear like a lead line and go, hey, this is how you kind of play that. That's super helpful. Honestly, outside of that, like, I made a bunch of cool friends that I stay in contact with, but I don't know. Outside of that, it was kind of pointless. I hate gen eds. They're stupid. I think like half the college system is set up for you to like hate yourself the whole time. So I think that I wish that I could have done just the first year and had some sort of like degree that I could take with me. You know what I'm saying? The second year for me was getting into educational courses, and I really hated it. That's when I decided I wanted to drop out, and I was done. I tried to work it around that I didn't want to do education and tried to do communication stuff or whatever, and I don't know. I just didn't want to end school with being $40,000 in debt. And so I ended up leaving after my second year, and I only owed like $5,000. So I just paid it off pretty quickly, like a couple months, and then I was kind of washed my hands of it and I was done. Yeah. So like I said, and it's kind of like what you said, is like having that foundational knowledge of those key things is really cool.
It's really important.
But outside of that, it's kind of I think it's diminishing returns too. Like,
right, and then you also have to understand like there's different kinds of curriculums. Like if you're doing something that's more theory based, that's going to help you out as a writer and a producer so much. And like, I mean, you can definitely take classes outside of that. You know, you could get a teacher and pay for lessons. You can, take one-off courses. Like there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. But a lot of these are kind of set up where, like, there's, I think it's California University, like of Pennsylvania. We call it Cal U around these parts. They have a music, like, tech program or something. And I know a couple kids who went there, and the one got a job just doing, like, AV after he did 4 years. And then I was just looking him up on Facebook. He's going back to school for music education, because more than likely that reality probably set in of, man, there's nothing I could do with this degree. The other one, I couldn't figure out what he did, but I know he's not like producing records. And like, because I remember they were like, well, why aren't you doing something like that? Because like I don't want to. Like I want to go produce records. Yeah. And I think a lot of people just get stuck up in that idea of, well, if I go to school I could get a job, but like you don't get hired as like a full-time producer. Like you just don't, unless if you're like one of the staff guys at like a huge studio, but like you have to have a track record to get in there. Like if you just send them your resume with a degree on it, they're going to be like, where's your portfolio? Yeah. The way the system worked, or at least it used to work in like the studio industry, was you would go to school for engineering, like a studio engineer, and you'd learn all the cable patching, you'd learn how to run tape, you'd learn how to do like clean the mics, you'd learn how to change out tubes, whole 9 yards, and then because it was a lot more hands-on. And you get a job as an intern at some big studio, because there were a bunch of really big studios back then, and you'd run coffee and grab pain medicine and grab cigarettes, grab beer for people, and sit in a corner and just watch. And
then at some point they'd teach you more and you'd graduate into doing your own stuff, or they'd give you opportunities to do like produce your own records in the rooms or whatever in like the off hours. So, and you kind of grew into it that way. With the modern era of music, that's kind of gone. Like, internships in studios are kind of, I mean, they exist obviously, but they're few and far between by comparison to 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. And like another thing is most of these places don't even look for interns anymore. They just look for runners.
Yeah, that's true. Or they look for runners, but like even the interns, this is actually really funny. Even now, the interns are probably more qualified producers than a lot of the people that are coming out of schools.
Yeah.
Because they've probably been self-producing stuff for 5 years prior to them getting this internship and being a runner at a big studio.
Yeah. And so like another thing to take into consideration, it's like back in the day, like you would go to school and then get an internship, but like most of what you learned was still through the internship. Mm-hmm. So like now, like you can't really do that. I mean, I know a guy who did that. He went to school and then he got an internship in Nashville at this studio, and now he just like he's an engineer, but like that's all he does. Mm-hmm. And it's like I don't want to spend almost $200,000 just to make $15 an hour. And you know, it's just one of those things where like he has some cool credits, but those credits aren't paying the bills because it's in a pretty niche genre, and on top of that, like you were still just the engineer.
Yeah, it's not like you're making back end or anything off that.
Like, you're right, he was a staff engineer. Like no one's gonna like seek you out.
And being a staff engineer, as a person who's had to do that before, is very boring. It is very much a. So for those that don't, because this is kind of not. A staff engineer isn't really something that like you think about nowadays, right? You think about like a producer or an engineer, but like a staff engineer definitely exists. Still. Basically, you are a person who is on call so that if somebody books a studio session, you are there to sit down and hit record.
Yep. Well, another thing now with how everything is being done from home and people only rent out studios to like track, like you'll see more often than not now, like the bigger studios don't even have like true engineers. They just like their rental comes with an assistant to show whoever's renting it how to use the space. A
lot of times the assistant is the person that runs the actual session for the producer that has hired them. That is pretty common.
Yeah.
But
it's like you either have like a
they don't get
techie
the credit
person,
really,
like
though.
Yeah, it's just it's a great way to meet people.
Mm-hmm. And that's true if that's your end goal. But that's the other thing, and I think we're going to get into something else, is like me as a person and you as a person I think whether we had school or not, we would be where we are at. And I think that it's a term of how long it takes, right? I think that's really it. And like, you didn't do a ton of school. I did more than you, but not a bunch. But I do think that my schooling has helped me kind of jump over a couple hoops that otherwise would have like kind of hindered me as far as like musicality, ability to play a bunch of instruments. Like I learned a bunch of stuff like in that area. But me translating that into production is on me. No one taught me that. Like, I had to sit down and go, okay, well, I know how to do this, so I can, where I'm producing this record that needs A, B, C, D, whatever the heck, and okay, well, I can sit down and do this thing now, and so that's kind of helped. But turning that into a job, no one teaches you how to do that. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to come out and I'm going to be making a bunch of money and making hit records. It's not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, both skill-wise and business-wise, like, it takes a long time to build things. I've been on the pop train for a little over a year at this point, and it's just now catching on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just hit a huge milestone this month, and, like, we're talking 15 months in.
Yeah. And you just hit, like, your first, like, really solid move into the market.
Yeah.
And that's every day. That's working every day.
Yeah, it's literally working every day. And, pulling 12 to 16-hour days consistently. Yeah. And, like, it's exhausting, but, like, it's worth it. Like,
for sure.
I'm meeting so many cool people, man.
And I think and from what, because John said this, it's like, because he went to,
he did, like,
LA recording school.
Yeah.
Which is, like, similar. So I did a similar-ish thing. He was like, yeah, it was more about, like, baseline knowledge and getting, some connections with people and friends and stuff. And a lot of people can, like, access those a little better. And I think it's more about the people that make the most out of their time there. Nick even said this. It was like his buddy that went to Full Sail, right? That he had a buddy that went to Full Sail. He was around the studios all the time, always asking questions to the teachers. He was in the studios every single day. Every night he was booking sessions with people, like, outside of his schoolwork. Like, he was working consistently, trying things, like, on top of school. He was pushing himself in a direction that, and like I told Nick whenever we talked about this, it was, he would have done that regardless. School just helped him fast track some of the baseline knowledge on, like, this is what a mic does. This is what a compressor does. This is an EQ. This is, that kind of thing.
Right. And so what's interesting, like, coming up without that formal education, like, I don't know how to use a desk. I'll be honest with you. If you put me in front of a desk, I'd be like, faders go slide. And, like, that's about it. Like, I don't know much about, like, actually, like, analog routing. Like, I know how to use a patch bay. That's
compressor
simple.
Goes burr.
Yeah, compressor goes burr. And so, like, I don't, big chord go click. That's a good one. That's on my planner.
That's a good one.
Shout out to Nick. Dude, he was telling me, okay, so I'm derailing this.
Yeah.
This
tangent.
is my job, all right? I just had to try to stay on task for 3 episodes in a row, all right? I get to derail. Nick and I were in the studio working on some stuff, and my idea is to just pull the vocal out of the patch bay right into my Apollo, and then run my outs back through the patch bay to hit his hearback system at the studio. And so we were looking for the TT to XLR connectors, and we couldn't find any that were long enough. So I clicked the XLR into another XLR, and I was, like, so out of it. I just went, big chord go click, and that became a thing. And so I put it on my planner because I couldn't think of anything else stupid to get put on it. And he was telling me that the one company he was working for, whenever they would do live shows, instead of wrapping up the XLRs and, like, putting them in a case, they would connect them all together and wind them up on a giant spool. That would bother me so bad. Watching people do that big chord go click.
Scream. That would make me scream.
I would literally start sobbing.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, it was pretty crazy because, like, they just couldn't figure out a better way to do it until, like, they did. And I was like, what was the better way? And he goes, wrapping them by hand.
Wrapping the cables like you're supposed to. Oh my gosh.
Like, I wonder how often they were, like, going through cables, but
bro,
anyway, back to the
ripping them apart. Yeah.
Right. Back to the conversation.
Anyway.
Here. Being that I didn't come up in, like, a traditional studio environment, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I hear people talk about things and they're very, like, opinionated about certain things in the studio, whether it's, like, the type of microphone or the type of preamp that they're using or whatever. And it's like, I'm making records that I think sound great on a $500 interface and a mic I bought for $500. And so, like, to me, if you handed me, like, a 251 or even, like, a clone of a 251, I would be like, wow, it's so nice and bright.
Yeah.
But, like, people would literally look at, like, that $4,000 clone and be like, oh, this sounds terrible. Don't even bring it near me.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool that I didn't come up in that environment because I have no bias. If I need to learn something, I just Google it real quick.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I think that people kind of know too much for their own good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm taking the Lewis Bell monthly course. And so I went through the intro stuff last night, and he has this massive template with like 250 plugins loaded up. I put a video of it in the group chat, and he just does it so he could just reach for things and not have to load up more plugins. I think it's absolutely insane. Like, dude's a madman. But at one point he goes, yeah, so I have Slate VMR here, and this is just like the stock preset, but I think it gave vocals a nice volume. That's what he said, a nice volume. Awesome. And it's like, if that dude can care so little, and still have how many number ones? He has like more weeks on
ridiculous
in the top 10 than like anybody ever or something like that because of how many songs are up there at once. And like I think it was last year, halfway through the year, he had already spent over a year on the charts.
I'm about to look up his all music so
Dude.
I can.
Insane. And so it's things like that I think we have to remind ourselves, like, sometimes being too educated really isn't a good thing. You know, there are certain things that really, really matter, but for the most part, you can get away with doing a lot in this day and age that might not be technically correct, but like you don't
Jonas Brothers, Shawn Mendes, Camila Cabello, Selena Gomez, Tiesto.
Everything by Post.
Everything by Post. Yeah, Five Sauce. He did a bunch of Five Sauce stuff.
Bro, he did my favorite Taylor Swift song was done by him, Afterglow.
Yeah. So yeah, dude's got credits for days. Yeah, I'm really interested in that. I'll have to look at that course. I think so.
And speaking of Taylor, Jack Antonoff is another great example of this. He was going through his studio, and he has tons and tons of outboard gear, but they're all instruments. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really have like racks and racks and racks. And so he just goes through and he's like, yeah, like I like everything here because it's very quick for me, and I like the sounds that I'm getting. What like typical things that you say when people ask you about the stuff you use. But he also doesn't really think too much about it. He was like, well, sometimes you just want to use an SM58 on the vocal because that's what it needs. And he's very much in that same thought of
it's
like,
a very beautiful way to think about it too.
Right, like these things don't matter, but like in audio school they'll tell you the contrary, where it's like, oh well, with this microphone it's best if you use this preamp and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, this is something, and this is kind of going back to the whole like learning your basics thing. I think there is something to be said for the place where school is really good, in my opinion, is learning the baseline of things. So like not learning biases, but learning facts. So for instance, I did a class in Charlotte. I drove an hour and 3 hours round trip, 4 times a week for 3 months, to go, while I was working a full-time job, to go to this course that they were running at a studio, because the dude that runs the studio has got some Grammys for mixing. He just got a Grammy for DaBaby, because I think he did mastering on it or something, on one of DaBaby, on Suge, I think, or one of, no, it was Rockstar. It was Rockstar. That's what DaBaby won a Grammy for. So he did the mastering for that stuff, and I went up there probably 3 years ago or something like that. It's called GAT3. It's in Charlotte. Shout out to the homies. They're great. They do a recording academy course that's like so cheap, dude. It's like, I want to say like $5,000 for 3 months. But the key thing is it's a small class size. They teach you everything, and I'm talking everything, like as far as basics go. we started with waveforms, why waveforms are the way they are, like like a little bit of like acoustical science behind everything. They also teach you Pro Tools because that's what they use at the studio, so it's easier for you to learn that way. But they have a class on MIDI. They have the fun part is, so it was 3 days a week. You do 2 days during the week of like schooling class where you like sit in a classroom and you like learn, this is this. So we're learning mics. So you learn what like polarity, how a mic works. Like, I don't know if you know how a SM57 or anything like that works, but like there's little plates in there that when you sing into them, it activates the electrons in the plates, and that's what sends the vocal through the cable. It's like that kind of stuff for like fixing things in the future is actually going to be pretty helpful.
It's very helpful. And another thing like I missed out on was just like components and how they make things sound different. Because like I mean, in the different discords that I'm in, like some of these guys are wizards. Like David Fuller, he knows exactly how he would build a speaker. He knows how the cabinet would be shaped. He knows exactly what speakers he would put in it, which tweeters to put in it, like what kind of crossovers to do, how to tune it. Like he knows those things, and that blows my mind because I bought a pair of focal shaped twins and I listened to them and I said, big speaker, go burr. And my mixes sound fine on them. I like how they sound. It's bright enough for me. I'm a happy camper, but he swears that 2 to 3K on these speakers are just impossibly inaccurate. But to me, it sounds great because that was always a problem area for me. I hated speakers that had a lot of 2 to 3K. So it's cool that he knows the reason behind all that. But whenever I was shopping for microphones, I didn't know a ton about mics. I just knew I knew generally what different microphones sounded like and kind of what I was looking for. And, once I started diving into it and looking at how the different components caused them to sound different and then react under different circumstances with different vocalists, it kind of put me down the path of I just need to find a super clean microphone that's flat. And so I ordered a JZ BH2. It's on the way. And because like I probably would have bought a $3,000 reference if I didn't like look into that. And the reference wouldn't sound good on every voice, despite them being pretty clean. But they're just a little too bright. And so that was just like one of those things where if I would have just known that from the start, then I would have immediately started searching for a microphone that was transformerless and flat. Because I want to be able to use it on a vocalist who's just screaming. And then I also want to be able to use it on a quiet vocalist. Like I can always add saturation later, whether it's through like getting a 500 series rack or if I want to use a plugin. And like that's totally cool. But like there's just certain things that you need to kind of learn. Like I know guys who could hear compression and know exactly what compressor it is. That's why.
I definitely don't know that level of.
I'm not that good yet.
But that's experience too, man. Like, so the other thing I was gonna say is the cool thing about this course that I did was the 2 days you did like actual classroom things, like I said, where you learn about like whatever, and then that Saturday is a lab day, and it's a 8-hour day of you literally in the studio all day working on what you learned about in the class that week. So if it's mics, we had a bunch of different mics. We would sit down, we would like plug them in, and we would talk into the mics, and we would like shoot out. And they had a mic, like huge mic closet. I'm talking like 80 plus different microphones. And from like your 58, your SM58, all the way up to they had a freaking Sony C800. It was amazing. Like I got to hear them all and what they sounded like and what they did to my voice. What?
Dude, I pulled up their gear list and
it's huge.
They have more mics. So I have an artist down in Tampa that I'm gonna fly down and work with, and I'm going through the studios and I can't find a single studio that has a vocal chain that I like, which is depressing.
Yeah.
Like
this
they're all
studio
really
is
close,
great.
but then Clear Track has almost what I want, but it's too expensive for me to just like rent out for however long.
This spot's really cool. They have a bunch of really cool
Wow.
stuff.
They literally have everything. They have two C800Gs, a Neumann U47,
Yep.
ELAM
Telefunken.
251.
They have a Telefunken 87 like pre-war.
Dude, this is crazy.
So like you get to hear, so like I got to sit in a studio, track stuff with every single mic and hear the difference. And then what we did was we tracked it flat, and then we got to run it through different preamps and hear what the preamp did. And then we got to run it through different compressors and hear what the compressor did. And then part of the class is you track a song. So we found a band that came up. It was like a country rock band. And we tracked a song. We tracked full kit. We set it up. Like we tried a bunch of different options as far as like mics and compressors and EQs, and then it's a really cool. This is what school should be.
That's
as
what
far as
school
music
should
school.
be. Dude, they have a 54 Hammond C3 in Leslie. They have a 56 Wurlitzer, a 70s Rhodes. Ooh.
And
this place seems sick.
And the guys that work there are really great. Glenn and his wife Susan are sweethearts. Like when I tell you that if you're in the Charlotte area or even close by, go do this course. It is, especially if you're a newer person, this is probably one of the few in-person courses that I would suggest you do, because you will learn the baseline. Now, it depends on what you do with that information while you're taking the course, on how far that information will take you. The other thing is they do offer internships sometimes. So this is one of the few studios that still offers internships. They run assistants, they run the whole nine. It's a pretty big studio. I mean, they have two rooms. One is the A room, and that's where we did all of the stuff. And one is the B room, and they have a mastering setup there. And that's the other thing. You learn about mastering change. You learn about vocals. You learn about editing. So once we got past the tracking phase with the band that we brought in, we tracked all of the vocals, and we took all of that stuff back to our classes during the weekdays, and we practiced editing. So we practiced, elastic audio, and so we were using Pro Tools. So we practiced elastic audio, which is a time stretch editing format, versus Beat Detective, which is a spliced and moved editing format. And we kind of learned which one was better for what source, or like what we preferred and how we worked. They didn't really push any specific thing on us. It was more of, hey, here are the options. Let's figure out what works. And then we went through, compressors on plugins, and we went through EQs on plugins, and kind of we walked through the entire process of making a record, from literally talking to a band and setting up a session to the end where we mixed the song and got it mastered, and the band got it for free, which was pretty cool. So, but we got to sit in on the mastering session too, and kind of, watch a mastering session, which is like, most people have never even seen a mastering session before. Like, that's huge. So, yeah, I think I hype this thing up a lot, mainly because it taught me a ton. And I see so many people talking about schools and going down the don't do it. And I generally agree. Like, school is probably not for you. I would try to find some sort of course, in-person class like this with a studio, some sort of recording program with a studio.
There's a massive difference between a degree and then like a course.
So like, I think Blackbird does one.
Yeah, Blackbird does one. There's the Recording Academy.
Yeah,
I think that's over in Ohio.
Yeah, and then that's the one that Chris Graham talks about sometimes, and a lot of those Ohio guys go there. And then I think there's a couple in the Northeast. I'm pretty sure there's one in New York somewhere, that are like not crazy expensive. But that's the other thing. These are, I mean, when you're talking about school, right? You're talking about a cool $60,000 to $80,000, right? Or let's pull it back. You're graduating college. You have your parents are like, what do you want to do for school? You know, a lot of parents, if we're lucky, your parents are like, I'll cover at least the first year of school for you, right? Or I'll cover the first 2 years of school. My parents were like, hey, I'll cover the first 2 years of school for you as long as you make decent grades. I was like, okay, cool. Say, hey, just give me the money, pay for this one $5,000 course. I'm going to take this course. If you could pay for this $5,000 course and have roughly, I mean, you're probably not going to get a year's worth of school from your parents. That's like 20 grand or 40 grand, depending on where you go for a private school. But they could probably give you, $7,000 or $8,000, right? Pay $5,000 for this course. You get a bunch of knowledge, baseline education, opportunity to talk to people, ask questions, handle real equipment, and then spend the other money on a computer and a really basic setup and start working. I feel like your money is going to be exponentially more well spent in that $7,000 to $8,000 than it would be over the course of 4 years and $60,000 to $80,000.
Also,
I just talked a lot. So
our friend, it was also perfect. For those who aren't on the YouTube thing, I snuck out and I went pee while he was doing all that talking.
Yeah.
It was perfect. Great timing. Like something that our friend Seth said is that you'll learn more if you try to mix 10 songs in 2 days than you would if you spent, 10 days mixing one song. And that's really true. That's something that I've been trying to like really dive into, and then you get a general idea of what you're good at and then what you're bad at. And so I noticed my vocal mixes have gotten a lot better recently, but they still aren't there. So I spent like a few hours last night and a few hours this morning just diving into like my vocal mixing. Like, what am I doing that I don't like? What am I doing that I really like? And then I'm going through my entire chain, figuring out how to simplify it, how to do different things to try to, get different results. And, really just paying attention to the little details, because I think it's important to kind of develop your skills broadly, and then once you're there, start honing in on the little things that make a huge difference. Because like the difference between a $500 mix engineer and then a $5,000 mix engineer isn't really that much. Like, what we'll say 10 to 20% difference between the two, right?
Yeah.
But it's that 10 to 20% that is worth the extra $4,500.
And it's the 10 to 20% that puts you in front of thousands of people as far as quality.
Yeah, like, people aren't paying you to do an okay job. They're paying you to do a great job. So like figuring out how to like just hone in your process for everything. I remember whenever I was first starting out and I was like kind of engineering stuff, like I would sit through and I'd figure out the easiest ways to track like complex guitar parts with different punch-in settings and how like what felt more comfortable for most people.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of able to just like work on like those specific things, and you'll see a lot more growth.
I would even
overall.
argue that the difference between amateur and professional as far as mixing engineer goes is roughly 10 specific moves.
Probably.
I would say, like, and you're talking about even less percentage wise, you're talking about 5% difference.
Yeah.
Like
if you're looking at it as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably.
Because it could be like using less compression, or using more compression in different ways, using more compressors, doing less compression overall. Like there's
something that I was
strategic things like that.
And like that really comes down to being able to listen, not only to your stuff but other people's stuff. My favorite mix right now is Always Do by the Kid Leroy. I think that vocal mix is perfect because it's insanely bright, but it sounds natural. A lot of pop music right now, it gets pretty scooped and it sounds unnatural. But if you're able to make it sound natural, that's really cool.
Sounds warm.
And the secret in that I've been noticing is it's all in the low mids. A lot of people will suck out the mids and then they're like, oh yeah, cool, it's bright. But really, it's a lot more than that. And so I've been like trying to figure out how I could get a more consistent low mid range out of my vocal. That's literally all I was doing for probably a total of 5 hours over the past 2 days. So I was using different multibands. I was using saturation. I was using spectral shaper. I was using all kinds of different
trying
things.
Stuff, yeah.
Just to try to get to glue that in place because it kept popping out and I didn't like it at all. And if it wasn't for me critically listening and figuring out, okay, what's different between, this mix and my mix, then I probably would have never have been like, yeah, I need to sit down and figure out how to tame my low mids and keep it like static essentially. And that's been a huge thing for me. Same with like 808s and getting 808s to sit right. A lot of people will just throw them in and like that's fine as long as it's not eating the whole mix. But like I've been playing around with different ways to get your low end to sit right.
I would say that educationally, you and I have done similar things. Outside of me doing that one course, from then on, educationally, you and I have done a lot of listening, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of Googling or YouTube searches or different watching people do things or asking questions. And honestly, asking questions has probably been one of the bigger things.
There's that. And then also don't be afraid to work with other people, man. You learn so much more from working with other people than you will any book.
Yeah.
And because everybody has their different tricks.
Yeah.
Whenever Seth mixed my song, I learned a lot about, how to get a present vocal without it being harsh. Whenever, I'm sending stuff for him to master, it's still just mind-boggling. I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Because it's just so loud and so clean.
Yeah, he kills it.
I don't understand it, but
being able to ask questions like, hey, what was your approach with my mix mastering this time? Or, hey, what did you do on my vocal here that really helped it sit a little bit better? That because I've been struggling with that, stuff like that. And so this is something else. Sometimes the best learning opportunity is for you to not work on your own stuff.
Yeah.
That's huge. And that's something that honestly, until about 3 or 4 years ago, I did not understand. Like I didn't grasp that until I went and worked in other studios with people and I was brought on to do, like if I was just brought on to do post-production or brought on to just write or brought on to like even for the VeggieTale stuff that me and Shama did, like I was brought on to write and produce, but I wasn't mixing and I wasn't engineering. I was just literally there to write parts, which is huge whenever I have the freedom to go, hey, give me that guitar, bam, bam, bam. And then I can see what he does with that guitar. Like, hey, here's this cool part, or hey, I need this Mellotron, or let's use your Prophet for this part. Let's set up an ARP and let's do that. And then watching what they did with all of that to put it together was huge for me. And like same thing, like working with mastering engineers, like sending it off to get mastered, say, hey, ask for feedback, say, hey, like what can I do to make my mix better for you as the mastering engineer who is helping me get it to the finish line. Or as a producer, if you do a rough mix, right, and you're working with a much bigger mix engineer than you, hey, can you give me some feedback on my rough mix now that you have the raw files of what I was also working with? Like, where are some places that kind of went wrong? Where are some places that I kind of messed up? Especially if they use the same DAW as you, being able to send them your session and be like, hey, look at my session, kind of see what I'm doing. Why not? Like, why not ask? You'll learn exponentially more than reading a book. Now, we say all that to say it's probably not for everybody, school, college, music college in general. I will say there are some key areas where it's very necessary, but it's not in the pop music industry, generally speaking. There's a couple that are. If you want to be an A&R or some sort of like music business person, I would say that there's probably I would say that you could probably it would probably behoove you to go to school for some sort of music business to learn the ins and outs of that section of it. Yeah, I would, because you're much more likely to get some sort of internship with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, you're much more likely to get an internship, but like if that professor knew how to make it in the music industry, why are they a professor right now?
No, I understand that. I'm talking about the business side of things. I'm not talking about the artist, producer, engineer side of things.
That's what I'm talking about though. Like if they're such a great A&R, why aren't they working at Interscope?
Or maybe they did and they just wanted to retire and make that easy money teaching.
That's true. They might have.
So like that's a big part of it. I feel like the business side of thing is a little more. It's not necessary. I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm saying that you could probably get a lot more out of school than somebody trying to be a producer or an engineer going to school for music business, because you also learn stuff like law. You learn like tax sides of things with music industry. There's a bunch of stuff that you're going to learn in school like that is going to trial and error with that kind of stuff is like not very good to mess with. So
I mean, at the same time though, that's why lawyers exist.
Yeah, but you still have to know like how to read a contract, stuff like that. So there, like I said, I think that's one area that you could probably say. The other one is theater. There's some say for, obviously it's not necessary. You can go to local theater and do that stuff, but like learning to act and dance in a theatrical area, and as far as the music industry goes, I feel like you could probably go to a specific theater school for that kind of thing and push into that more.
I know people who do both theater and then also like dance, like for like music stuff, like music videos or like live performances. Yeah. And the two people that I know of both dropped out of school.
Yeah, so I know about half and half. I know some of the people that are dancers didn't do school, but most of the people that I know that are acting on a higher level did.
Actually, Sam's sister, she actually like helps run like a dance studio, and she went to school for like microbiology.
Yeah, that's funny.
Just pretty cool. So she has a great plan B.
Yeah,
she has a fantastic plan B.
Exactly.
It'll be a glow up.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I don't like money wise.
Yeah.
Money wise.
No, but I will say there is something to be said for being around a lot of people and getting a chance to act in a lot of stuff. That's kind of where like the theater thing really helps, because you get opportunities that if you were trying to do that, you're just not going to get any opportunities.
I don't know. Again, though, like my friend Noah is starting to do cool stuff with acting, and he didn't go to school for it.
Yeah,
he just did
like I said,
local
it's not,
stuff that he.
I'm saying it's not necessary. I'm saying it's, especially if you don't live in a large area, it's probably pretty helpful.
I would argue that you're better off saving the money and just moving to a better city.
Or that. Or moving to a better city for school and then just staying in that city.
Yeah, that too.
Like that's an option. You could use school as an excuse to move.
Yeah, because like I mean, at the end of the day, like you're able to get auditions without.
Without any. Yeah. You can get auditions, but getting in sometimes, honestly, dude, getting ins in some of those auditions is like knowing a professor that used to be friends with this director, or like, dude, that whole world's so connected, like, and very clicky. Another one that is required if you're going to teach if you want to teach and that's your thing, like you got to go to school for that. Mainly because not that you couldn't teach without it, but that there are required like state guidelines that you have to pass like X amount of tests to teach. Like you have to pass a test and have a certificate. I think it's like to teach in high school, you have to have at least a bachelor's degree, and to teach in college, you have to have at least a master's degree.
I think that varies based on the state.
It varies based on the state, but I think that's what it is in South Carolina at least.
And PA, it's super weird. Like you could become a teaching assistant by just like taking an online course.
Mm-hmm.
It's very bizarre.
But you can't be a teacher unless you take the state like teaching test.
Yeah,
which
like
is
you're able to do like
really
the state
complicated.
It's so bizarre.
It's really dumb. I'm not saying that it's
so
right.
dumb.
I'm saying that to do it, this is how you have to do it because that's the guidelines that are in place for us to do it. I'm not saying it's cool. I'm saying it's freaking stupid.
It's
but
so stupid. Just let people teach.
Dude, like, and well, they have like really specific guidelines you have to follow. That's one of the reasons that I didn't want to teach, and that I would much rather teach it this way, where it's more conversationally and from experience rather than, hey, I have to follow X amount of guidelines in order to keep my job and pass this test in order to keep my job. It's really stupid. But you do have to go to school for that specific thing. Jazz is really fun to go to school for just because you get because a lot of those guys are really well connected in that world because a lot of jazz musicians end up teaching.
It's also a really cool thing to just tell random people. Like, study jazz.
Yeah, it's cool. Obviously, you definitely don't have to go to school for that, but that is just like, I don't know. It's just a cool thing. I know a lot of guys that gig that are jazz musicians went to school for like jazz, like a lot of Berkeley guys and a lot of like that actually went to like physical Berkeley and a lot of dudes that went to not MTSU, but the other one in Nashville.
Juilliard.
No, that's in New York.
I have no clue. Is that a music school?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. At least I was close. There's a band, Belmont.
Yeah. Belmont. A lot of guys that go there that end up still staying in the music industry end up being like, being like in jazz groups that like go play events and stuff. And like, so like that's, and you make good money doing that. You can be a gigging jazz musician for the rest of your life.
It's silly how much better like some of like the more commercial and like corporate gigs are, man. Like
they're so good at what they do.
It's silly. I know that Nick at one point he was like touring with like some like CCM or I forget what it was, some kind of like artist that would do like more like commercial events. Mm-hmm. And he was like, yeah, it was cool, like I was actually on a bus and actually got paid.
Dude, the freaking that conversation that we had with him about school was actually really, really good. So I'm going to suggest if you're listening to this and you're like, I just want more, like I'm interested to hear more about like school talk. Like if this is something that's piqued your interest, and this is actually pretty apt because it's, as we're recording this, it's April. We're coming near to the end of the school year for a lot of people. People are about to graduate. A lot of people have already made college decisions, but some people are like me and Josh and are coming to the end of the school year and they're going, I don't know, I'm gonna graduate and that's what I'm gonna do. So
yeah. I've seen like 5 different posts this week, so I wanted to talk about this because all these people are like, what music school should I go to? And it's like, well, first of all, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Where do you live? Yeah. How much money do you have? Like,
there's a bunch that goes into it. It's not just what music school do I want to go to.
Yeah, it's like America as a whole kind of like glorifies college as like this end-all be-all system that's going to make you a lot of money. And that's not the truth. A lot of people waste a lot of money. And a lot of people have entire careers built off of their college experience. So
another good person to go back and listen to Nick's episode, Dewar specifically, Nick Dewar's episode of the podcast. We talk about going to school, and we talk about his experience as a live audio engineer and a producer people coming in that have degrees and like kind of what the dichotomy of like, or the disconnect, sorry, there between like what they've learned in school and his actual like live experience, and how that just, it doesn't mesh always. He said some people are great and then a lot of them aren't. But another really good, if you just want a quick Google or YouTube search, Kenny Beats was talking on his Twitch stream, and they posted it on YouTube, about he went to Berkeley. I don't know if you knew this. He went to Berkeley. He went for guitar and he went for music business. I don't remember if he graduated or not. I think he did. I want to say he did. But he said a lot of what he learned in Berkeley was more about the people around him and being friends and constantly doing stuff. And he obviously learned like some cool stuff, like theory and all that from guitar, and he learned some cool things about the insides of the business and how it works and how to make it work for him. But something that a lot of people say that I think you guys should take away with this, and this is probably where we'll end, is just because you do school doesn't mean you're in the middle of your career. When you finish school, that's when your career starts. That's when the grind starts. Whenever you start working, that's when the grind starts. And just because you have schooling doesn't mean that you are guaranteed or that you deserve anything.
Yeah. And then also keep in mind, like, if you're younger, if you're in high school right now, seriously, go do whatever you have to do to get the things you need to do to get a head start. Because, like, I'm super thankful I got started at the age I did, because everything I learned was wrong, because it was all like how people do things in metal. So like I feel like I didn't start until the past like 2 or 3 years, even though I've been at it for like 8 at this point. Maybe more.
But you have like 2 or 3 years of learning what not to do, which is honestly equally as important.
Yeah. And like it takes a long time just for you to like Phineas was talking about that. He was like, it took me like 7 or 8 years before I even found something that I was like, okay, this almost competes. You know? Yeah. And like that's kind of where like I was at too. It's like I'm probably coming up on 10,000 hours here within the next few years, which I'm excited about. But like, yeah, like you don't master something for 10,000 hours. That's a lot of hours. And like you're only going to get there if you keep working and working towards like actually doing things the way that you want to do them in the future. And like just being intentional about the things that you're doing is super, super important.
Yep. So I think that's a good place to stop. We're hitting on about an hour or so. Guys, it's good to be back. I'm glad that I'm here.
Everybody's glad too, because they don't have to listen to me ramble.
Just as like an ending update, baby's good, wife is good, everybody's healthy, everybody's good over here. Yeah. So thank you again, Josh, for running the last couple weeks or so without me. And guys, if you got any questions, as always, hit us up. We did have a question about the Discord. Apparently some of the link or something was broken. So I'm going to
Discord links. I'm pretty sure Discord links automatically expire.
So we're going to fix that.
Mind you, there's nobody in that Discord besides me and Drew right now.
Let's get some people in there.
So let's get some people in there. Get it popping. If not, then we have a backup plan.
And
I do.
And we're gonna I'm gonna have Josh post the video that he shared in our private group chat in the Discord. So if you want to see what that massive session from Louisville looked like.
I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. So we'll wait until I'm done with the course and then I'll share it.
Yeah, but it'll get shared in there eventually.
I don't want them to kick me out, man. No, somebody from Monthly will be looking for people who are sharing content who didn't pay.
Nah, I mean, yeah, you're just showing crazy plugin chains.
It's so sick.
But it's so sick. But yeah, we'll do that, and I'll try to drop some of the videos that I've talked about in here in the Discord. If you're interested. So yeah, hit up links in our description on Instagram at Home Studio Hangout. Come say hey. Once again, hit us up if you got any questions, and thanks for hanging out.
Bye.
And that's it for this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today. If you'd like to find any of the links to all of the stuff that we talked about today, you can find it on YouTube. Just search Home Studio Hangout, or find it on the After School Podcasts YouTube channel. All the links for everything we talked about will be in the description of this episode. Thanks again for checking us out. If you aren't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast channel. Leave a review if you gain some knowledge or learn something from what we talked about today. It helps other people find us and maybe even grow a little bit more. Once again, thanks for coming and hanging out, and keep on creating.